say, but um, here at the Greater Colorado Council, our effort is to increase waste diversion and organics diversion from landfills in rural communities, particularly those outside of the Front Range. We know that many of the communities that are on this call now would probably not consider themselves rural, but they are in comparison to many of our other constituents in the Front Range. And so our efforts are tailored to providing education as well as information about different opportunities in rural communities for increasing waste diversion. Rachel, anything you want to add to that?
I think that's a great intro. I would just like to add, this is, one of the councils of Recycle Colorado, obviously. You are members, or you're either here as members of Recycle Colorado or as special guests for this particular meeting. And to the extent that we would love to build connections throughout our network, we invite you to put your name and your organization in the chat just to share with folks who is here. And also would like to remind people, we, especially in the recycling industry, love to talk with acronyms. So please, if you're using an acronym, try to remember to say what that acronym means. And otherwise, I will do my best, and I invite others to as well to pop into the chat what an acronym might be. I'm guessing we're going to be talking about potentially MRFs, material recovery facilities, and that those sorts of things. So I think with that, I guess the last thing I would ask, Ben, if you would please just quickly give a rundown of what we're going to do today, and let people know what to expect, and then we can kick it over to Jennifer.
Wonderful. So on the agenda today, we are starting with welcome and introductions. As always, put those in the chat. Thank you for mentioning that, Rachel. We will then jump into a presentation by Jennifer Richardson and the Mesa County Landfill pertaining to the timeliness and purpose of organic diversion discussions currently, as well as Regulation 31. We'll then jump into a presentation from South Canyon Landfill and Liz Morrow, who will talk about city ownership and the implications of city ownership, as well as their composting process. And she'll also touch a bit on some end markets as well. And then finally, we will hear from Jace Driver from CDPHE, who's here to talk about permitting needs and tiers for organics regulations. We'll follow that presentation from each of those wonderful speakers with a policy committee update from Rachel. We'll do a few EPR updates, and we'll finish with some member updates if anybody has anything to bring to the table. And with that, I am happy to pass this along to Jen.
Awesome. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here during your lunch hour. Um, really appreciate your interest in learning more about how compost operations might work in your communities. As mentioned during our presentation today, we're going to share what it's like to run a compost operation, drawing on some real world experiences from local governments across Colorado that are actively composting. I know a lot of folks are starting to think more about diversion and what that could look like in your community. Let me pull up. So I'm going to share with everyone the presentation. And as I go through it, well, I'll talk about that in a second. Sorry. Let me just share it here. Share my screen. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up or something about if whether you guys can see the
We're not seeing it current. Oh, it's popping
oh,
up now.
look good?
There it is. Yep, we can see you. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. All right. So, um, for everybody that doesn't know me, my name is Jennifer Richardson. I'm with Mesa County. I run I'm the solid waste division director. I oversee a compost facility, a landfill, hazardous waste collection, some transfer stations. Today, speaking with me, I'll be joined with Liz Morrow from the city of Glenwood Springs. She also has a landfill and runs a composting operation. And then originally, Bill Shank was also going to speak with us today. He's from Summit County. He's unable to join us, but he operates the compost program at the scrap facility, which is really a fantastic operation, and just a little bit different from what we're doing in Mesa County and what Liz is doing. So if you haven't visited or connected with him before, I absolutely encourage you to reach out. Bill is incredibly knowledgeable and generous with his time, and it's just another operation. And they're being in Summit County, they have different challenges, right? Snow, for example, is not something that I have to deal with. I'm quite the opposite. We're very arid, and I'm like, please, can we get some moisture? So, just if that's something that might be something that is an issue in your community, again, I just encourage you to reach out to him. Also, towards the end of our presentation, we're going to have Jace Driver from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, acronym CDPHE, right? Who is going to be talking us through the permitting process for compost operations. The permitting piece of it is really an important component for you to consider when you're thinking and looking into a compost program, and whether that's right for your community and the type of permit that you might want. So he's going to give kind of a high level introduction to that. So today we're going to talk about operations, permitting, challenges, opportunities, all those great things from people actively working and doing this type of organics diversion and compost. Before we get into the operations, I think we should just talk briefly about why organics diversion and composting is becoming such an important strategy for landfill emissions mitigation. And why are we even thinking about investing, a lot of money into diverting something that is currently being managed in a landfill? So when we're talking about organic materials in landfills, we're talking about things like yard waste and food waste. And organic material is responsible for the majority of methane emissions in landfills. It's a very potent greenhouse gas. I'm sure you don't have to tell this group that, but it has a global warming potential about 28 times greater than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period. So because of that, reducing methane emissions is a major climate focus across Colorado. And in 2021, the state introduced something called the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Reduction Roadmap, which specifically identified landfills as a source of emissions and an area where we want to see some reduction so we can hit our reduction targets for 2030. The roadmap specifically calls out waste diversion, specifically calls out composting as key strategies to help the state meet their emissions reduction goals. So knowing this, and knowing this is the direction of the state, in December, the Air Quality Control Commission approved something called Regulation 31. It's the landfill methane rule. Landfill methane has been regulated for several decades at this point at the federal level, but this new state rule is more comprehensive and applies to smaller landfills that the federal program doesn't touch. That means many more landfills, all Colorado landfills really, are now subject to some kind of monitoring, reporting, and potentially very expensive emissions control requirements. And so we've got this renewed interest in diverting organics because it can reduce methane generation, lower long-term regulatory burden, help avoid and delay costly gas collection and control systems. So I'm not going to deep dive into Regulation 31, but at a very high level, the rule includes some annual waste in place reporting, participation in the Air Pollution Control Division's remote monitoring program, just a lot of additional monitoring and modeling and surface emission requirements, especially as your landfill gets a little bit larger, your methane generation rates start getting a little bit higher. And much smaller landfills than ever before are now being required to install gas collection and control systems, which for our very small landfills, you want to get away from. That can be very expensive, right? You can invest a substantial amount of money in controlling the gas that is being generated, or you can spend less money, but also money, right? Diverting organics and stopping the problem before it becomes a problem, right? And anybody who has worked in an industry setting, you always want to eliminate the issue rather than control the issue, right? Um, so let me um, now that we've kind of talked about why this is important and why we want to talk about organics diversion. I'm going to talk a little bit about the realities of running a compost operation because it also comes with its fair share of challenges, right? We've been operating a composting program since 2000. Um, today we have a class 3 facility, which means that we can take biosolids, pre and post consumer food waste, yard waste, manure, but we don't take all of those things. Right now, we're just taking yard waste, manure, and coal fruit, which is pre-consumer, uh, pretty much like peaches and pears and things from our ag sector. And the reason that we have to do that, even though we are permitted to take post-consumer food, is because of how expensive the infrastructure is. Um, I mean, that's just a reality that I want to be, upfront and that everybody should be thinking about. Um, If we did the expansion, we could definitely take food waste of all kinds and biosolids if we wanted to also. Right now, our biosolids are just going in the trash. But that expansion is a $900,000 investment in infrastructure. So we really have to have careful planning around funding and really long-term market development. Um, it's important, I think, for us to make sure that we understand that feedstock is what is coming in to the compost process and compost is what is coming out. I think it's very confusing to the consumer when we are saying, bring us our compost and then we'll sell you compost. So be mindful that if you are looking into an operation like this, that you really are stressing that it's diverting a feedstock there, you're diverting organics, and the end product is something different. It's compost. Um, we still I mean, and you don't have to do every material out there, right? So we do yard waste, we do manure, and we do this coal fruit I mentioned. And we're still processing 50,000 cubic yards of material every year from self-haul residents, landscapers, tree service companies, and then more recently, haulers that are doing curbside collection. Um, and because we don't take post-consumer food waste, we don't have contamination challenges that you hear about. So for communities that are just getting started, um, start with a limited material stream. Get comfortable with that in your operation, and then expand over time. Um, just taking what we do take, we still produce multiple materials that we can sell, half-inch compost, quarter-inch compost, and mulch. Our annual operating budget is $700,000 a year. We do charge for material drop-off. Initially, we had that to free, and I thought there was to encourage use of the facility. I would discourage making anything free. It's very hard to go from free to now you charge. So if you want to encourage use, just keep your fees low, but I wouldn't recommend doing it for free. We do now charge, which is great, but and then your compost and mulch sales. One of the biggest challenges I would say is your end markets, right? One of the things that I found very surprising was when right now we sell about 50% of the product that we make. And our compost facility is subsidized by landfill tipping fees. In order to make that facility break even, I need to sell all of the material that I make. And you think, well, you're in an ag sector. Why aren't you selling all of the material that you make? I don't have a great answer for that other than hauling is really a challenge. Um, Application can be really a challenge for some folks. Um, so when you are thinking about starting a compost facility, be cognizant that it could require some subsidy from your landfill, yeah, if you have one nearby. One of the things that we are doing in this year coming up is a STEPS grant. Yeah, I don't know if everybody on here has heard of Colorado Circular Communities Enterprises. They have the acronym for that is C3, and they have a STEPS program, which is very specific to local governments, and it's where you can get grants and get money for equipment or for studies, right? And we're going to be doing a really robust market analysis to try to strengthen and expand our end markets. One of the things I'm really excited about with that is that we're going to be able to take that market analysis and share it with other landfills in the region so that they can, hopefully continue to sell out of their compost and expand the services that they're able to provide. Um, Composting absolutely works. It's just a balance of operations, markets, funding, and long-term planning, really. So that is my spiel, and I'm going to skip through these very beautiful slides were for the scrap program. Again, really encourage you guys to check this out. It's in Summit County. Bill Shank is out for just a little bit. He'll be around again and would be happy to talk to you about it. Liz, I'm going to go to your slides, and you can go ahead and share, and I'll just do my best to roll through. And if I'm not doing a good job, just let me know and I'll switch.
Okay. Sounds good, Jennifer. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm kind of bummed Bill wasn't able to join us. I was really excited to hear about some of his new programs he has going on. But I will jump into it. So yeah, South Canyon Landfill. So we are a landfill owned by the city of Glenwood Springs. We are 7 miles outside the city, in a beautiful rural area. We are co-located with the landfill. So we are within, the landfill area, and we are a class 3 site, which means we can and do take all of the above. And we also, I'll talk about this a little more, but we take some really tricky, weird feedstocks like restaurant grease trap waste, and manure and cardboard, and we take post-consumer food waste. We take compostable packaging. We do it all. And I love that you're getting a bit of a different perspective. I love that you're getting different perspectives here because Jennifer says start small, take only a few things. I'm like, go for it. I'm like, go for it, take everything. If you can compost it, do compost it. I also feel like it's just really important if you're thinking about starting a compost site to look at what your site is and what would make sense for you. And if you're co-located with a landfill, you're already way ahead because it's going to make sense for you to take everything. If you're co-located with a landfill, just go for it because the permitting is going to be something that you're used to and you're able to deal with. Now, if you're like in a residential area or like you are a city parks department, maybe it makes more sense for you to start with the class 2 doing like mostly yard waste. But it kind of depends where you're at. But if you're co-located with a landfill, I say go for it, take everything. Part of that is since we're a city-owned landfill, we own the landfill, we make the rules. We have a lot of control over who we get our feedstocks from, how we get it, what we charge for it, and what we'll allow and won't allow in our feedstocks. So that part is important. If you're going to be a class 3 site, you have to think about, do you have the control to be able to tell people, I will allow this, I won't allow that? And then can you enforce it? And we enforce that by just working directly with haulers. We do find them if we have to, but we like 99% of the time we don't have to. We just talk to them and figure it out. We do actually have a landfill yard waste ban, which we just started, I think at the beginning of last year. So that's been interesting. It's been a little bit hard to enforce, but it definitely has increased our brush pile. We got about 1,000 tons more brush in 2025 than we did in 2024. So it's doing something, and we don't have brush going into our landfill anymore, which we like. So Yep, and we are self-funded by tipping fees and product sales. So I would say our compost operation costs about $400,000 a year to run, and that is completely paid for and more actually by our tipping fees that we charge for all of our different feedstocks and the product sales. If you want to, you can change the slide. Thanks, Jennifer. Um, so I'll just go a little bit through our process here. So we use a passively aerated static pile process, which in my opinion, if you're in a dry area of Colorado, I think it's one of the best types. Because you're not turning the pile. Your aeration is literally just due to how you build the pile specifically, which I'm happy to answer more questions about if anybody wants to reach out to me with personal questions about how to build these piles and how to really do it. I am also happy to share our SOP with other composters who want to use this type of pile. It works really well for us because it retains moisture and we don't have to water it and we don't have water, so that's a great option for us. Now, another way we get away with not having water is we accept really water heavy feedstocks like the grease trap waste, which comes in at like 90% water. So we are actually using an excavator to mix up some of our drier feedstocks with that grease trap waste and then put it into our piles. So that really helps us get the moisture we need without having to add water. It's also a little bit of, yeah, so I think I put on the slide there. It's extra work to build the piles up front because you really do have to make sure your staff is really well trained on how to build the piles and the reasons behind everything. And we do sometimes have some trial and error and have to redo stuff. But once people get it and once the piles are built, it's less inputs than windrow. Um, so yeah, I will say also, so yeah, accepting the grease trap is a good source of revenue because there's so few places for people to dump that. We probably could charge double what we are charging, but we're trying to keep it affordable for people. But even doing that, it's still a good source of revenues. So end markets. I will say, so yeah, end markets, we pretty much sell to everybody. We sell our compost for $40 a ton. Now, I think one of the main reasons that our compost facility is able to break even and even subsidize the landfill a little bit is our blends. So we sell blended soils. Those are super popular with contractors. Um, so I think if you can, I would aim to make those. If you are co-located with a landfill, again, you're already set up for success there because people are gonna bring you random dirt. And you just have to figure out what dirt you can salvage and what you can use. And you do have to test it. But it's definitely worth it. And I mean, we sell 3 or 4 thousand tons a year of our topsoil blend alone. So that's a big product. And we do in general, I don't really recommend giving away compost because we want to show people it has value because it does. But we do one compost give back a year of about 10 tons, and we kind of consider it our free sample to kind of get people enticed and get gardeners to see that it's not scary and see what it is. And that's super popular, and I think it works. Um, so I think that's pretty much it. And yeah, if we can go to Jace.
Hey all. Uh, Hi. So for those that don't know me, I'm Jace Driver. I'm with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. I work in our solid waste program. I do a little bit of everything in waste diversion, from regulating all of our recycling facilities to being the compost lead for the state as well, and regulating a good chunk of our compost facilities as well. So I'm going to fairly briefly cover the permitting requirements for compost facilities in Colorado. This could be a pretty long discussion if we really wanted to, because there is a lot of nuance to it. But I'll try to keep it short and sweet so we don't bore everybody to death. So, um, so there's a few things that I wanted to outline before I kind of talked about like the actual permit classes and the feedstock classifications and whatnot. Um, So there are a few things to consider long before you ever think about getting into composting. And Liz kind of covered a couple of those things, but the biggest and probably most important is your site selection, right? And there's a few components that go along with that site selection. Sometimes you're forced into the site that you have, right? So that site selection is not really going to be an option for you. But if it is an option for you, you need to think about several things. You need to think about your proximity to neighbors. You need to think about your access to water. You need to think about your proximity to groundwater. You need to think about what the soil looks like underneath your site. All of these things are going to play into the engineering controls and features that your facility is going to have, depending on your permit class. Another thing to think about your site setting is that on top of the state regulations that cover compost facilities, the local governing body is almost certainly going to have some requirements as well. And since local zoning is just a complete patchwork throughout the state of Colorado, I can't tell you what that's going to look like. So even for the very smallest of facilities, the conditionally exempt small quantities, it's just kind of like you register with me and you're good to go. There may still be a zoning process for you at your local government level, and there may not be. So the first place to start, I think, in any question on whether you're going to start a compost facility, you can certainly reach out to me to figure out what kind of classification is going to work based on what you want to do. But the next stop is definitely needs to be the local zoning board, local planning commission, whatever it is, and discuss what composting looks like for them. I'll tell you more often than not, they don't know how to deal with composting because it's not typically expressly written into their zoning code. So your job is going to be to try to convince them that it is not a solid waste disposal facility, so they don't treat you as such, because the permitting for those is generally pretty tough. So another thing that I won't really talk about in the actual permitting components itself, but there's going to be a public process for generally for the larger permitted classes of facilities, both from a state perspective, we'll put things out for public comment, and also with the local process. So if they do put you through a zoning change, there's probably going to be a public comment period and a public hearing for that. And if you're our largest class of facility, it'll require something called a certificate of designation. That is also going to be a public process with public comment and approval at a public hearing, usually at a county commissioner or city council meeting. So think about the public perception of your facility before you start. Make sure that you are making it known what you're trying to do and that you're going to be an environmental benefit for the area that you're trying to get into. Another thing that I would definitely recommend, especially if you're going to be a permitted class of facility, so that's class 1, 2, or 3, please get an environmental consultant and please get one that has worked on solid waste stuff within the state of Colorado before. They will help you with all of that oddball zoning stuff, as well as with dealing with our regulations and meeting the requirements within. They will save you time and money. So make sure you get one with experience here and get one that's good. And then the last super fun thing to know before you get into this, these are really broad timelines, but for the classes of compost facilities, your time to get a permit is going to vary. So conditionally exempt small quantity, that's the CESQ. That is simply a registration. The second you register with me, you're good to go, basically, unless I find something odd in your registration that I don't like, and I'll kick it back to you. But basically, that is like you register, you can start operating at that second. With me, keep in mind this excludes anything dealing with local zoning. You need to meet that local zoning check too before you start your facility. Class 1 facility is registration and a couple of other small components. You can usually get that done within a few months. A class 2, it's a bigger permit document, and that process is probably going to take 6 months or more. And then a class 3 facility, kind of a question mark because it really depends on the scope of the facility and how much back and forth we have and how much the local government wants to hang things up. But I would plan on at least 12 months from the time that you submit your permit documentation to the local government. So plan out some long timelines. All right. Wow, Jennifer, you made this so pretty. I would have pulled up. I was like, I didn't even recognize this presentation. This is not what I put together. It's beautiful. So let's talk about the facility types. So there's basically four, broadly speaking, four facility types. We have conditionally exempt small quantity and class 1, 2, and 3. I call class 1, 2, and 3 are permitted classes of facilities because they do actually require approval. Conditionally exempt small quantity, like I said, is basically just we call that kind of like a permit by rule type of facility where you just submit a registration to me, and as long as you're not making a horrible mess of things, you're just good to go. So since they are small and easy to register, the conditionally exempt small quantities are the ones that we have the most of. Um, they are a simple registration because they are extremely limited in the volume of material that they're allowed to manage. And I'll get into, I thought I had the feedstocks before this page, actually. Is that wrong? Oh, yep. Wait a minute. We go back one. Yeah, that's what we want first. Let's talk about these first before we talk about the facility types. So there are, wait a minute. Is this past? Now I'm really confused. Go back one more. One more. Well, I think my feedstock page is missing. So there's three, you go to the next slide. There's three classes of feedstocks. They are type 1, 2, and 3. You would think that they line perfectly with our classes of facilities, class 1, 2, and 3. They could, class 1 takes type 1, class 2 takes type 2. That's not how it works. We're going to make it confusing because it's just not that simple. So type 1 feedstocks are our lowest restriction, lowest environmental potential impact waste stream. Typically think of just clean vegetative materials. So yard waste, clean wood waste, things like that. Agricultural wastes that are like from the field can generally fit into that as well. Type 2 materials are food waste and manure. And type 3 is everything else. So tends to cover a pretty broad spectrum of things in type 3, a lot of industrial materials in there, biosolids, food processing waste, things like that. So conditioning exempt small quantity, they are limited to type 1 and type 2 only. And they're limited in volume on those. So you can have up to 100 cubic yards of type 1 and 20 cubic yards of type 2 on site and in process at any given time. Those are pretty small volumes. It's kind of like a community garden size compost facility, maybe on steroids. Um, those volumes are in process, on site and in process at any given time. So essentially from the second it hits your site until it's gone through what we call the pathogen reduction phase, which is just your time at temp. That counts towards your quantity volume. These can be commercial facilities. They can just be like community benefit facilities. It's a really simple facility registration. Moving into the permitted classes of facilities is when we start getting into your larger, typical commercial size facilities. So class ones, this used to be excluded to simply yard waste, largely yard waste facilities only. We recently, within the past couple of years, opened this up to allow for food waste composting to try to help grow the food waste compost sector. And hopefully we'll see more uptake of that. But there's a few different options within the class 1 facility classification. I won't go into great detail on them, but it's essentially you could have a fairly large yard waste facility up to 50,000 cubic yards that only takes type 1 materials, that is just yard waste and wood waste, or a facility that takes up to 5,000 cubic yards of materials and has some combination of type 1 materials and food waste. There's also an on-farm one that we can get into that can manage manure generated on site along with that food waste as well. We don't have a whole lot of class 1 facilities at the moment, but I'm hoping that this will be kind of our growth sector in the future. And we also added in food waste into class 1 because before this change, the only facilities that could manage food waste were CESQs and class 3s. And there's a huge gap between those two in the permitting requirements, as well as like the potential for business growth, right? CESQ is very small. The revenue is going to be really limited. Moving from that to a class 3 is just a huge leap, and it's kind of unrealistic. So we're hoping to create maybe this stepwise, so somewhere you go from a CESQ to a class 1, maybe onto a class 3 if you need to even, or maybe a class 1 is the solution there for you. Class 2 facilities, they're pretty minimally used anymore because they're kind of strictly set aside to be large manure compost facilities that accept yard waste. So I think I have exemptions from our regs on the next slide, but essentially ag waste composting, if you're only managing agricultural waste, just going to be manure and crop residues. those are exempt from the solid waste regulations and are actually regulated under the Colorado Department of Agriculture. So the way that we get these manure facilities, the three that we have, into our realm is that they'll take yard waste typically, or they'll take wood waste. Those are both solid waste. They don't fit under the agricultural exemption. So those facilities can take up to 50,000 cubic yards of manure and basically any type 1 feedstocks. The class 3 facilities, kind of a catch-all for everything that does anything beyond that. So like Liz and Jennifer both mentioned, potentially can take just in about any of those feedstocks listed in the type 3 materials, but that's all going to be dictated by the facility's specific permit. So just because a class 3 potentially could take those, that doesn't mean your class 3 can take them. It's like going to all be dictated by your permit. Your permit's going to detail the engineering controls. Those are specific to your site setting and the materials that you manage. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so what's the permitting look like for these facilities? The CESQs, like I said, it's a simple registration. It's a form that you fill out on our website. It's extremely straightforward. It's meant to be that way because we see them as pretty low risk and low potential for impacting groundwater, the environment, and human health. Once we step beyond that, because we're getting into larger volumes, we do have a little bit of a permitting component to it. And basically, these things kind of stack as you go up. Almost every facility has everything that's in class 1. Every class 2 has class 1 and class 2 stuff, and then class 3 has class 2. It'll make sense here in a second. So class 1 facilities, it is still just a registration, but you need to submit a closure plan along with that registration that details how you're going to clean up the facility when you're done. And you also have to have financial assurance. This is a big component and a big sticking point and a big cost component of your facility prior to operations. Financial assurance is essentially a financial mechanism that you give the state access to that covers the cost to complete closure in accordance with your closure plan. It's essentially a security blanket for us to say that if you bail on the site, we can come in and clean it up with this financial assurance component. Basically, every facility from class 1 on is going to have a financial assurance mechanism. I'll tell you that the biggest cost component of that financial assurance mechanism is usually the removal of unprocessed or unfinished materials. We're going to estimate that probably based off of your annual volumes. And it could be expensive. Even for a smaller class 1, it's potentially going to be $15,000 or more. So it is a big thing to consider before you get going. And unfortunately, we don't have any financial remedies for that at the state level at the moment. There's nothing that you can get to help subsidize or offset that cost. You'll have to come up with that on your own. Class 2 starts getting into like the hefty permit classes of facilities. You're going to have what is called an engineering design and operations plan. This is a pretty robust engineering document that covers exactly how you're going to meet all of the requirements of the regulations, from operations to engineering design, closure, post-closure, if that's necessary as well, testing, you name it. It's a pretty big document, and it's going to take a while for us to go back and forth to get it to a final place of review and approval. And then with class 3, we have all those things before it, and we add in this thing called the certificate of designation. The only important thing that you need to know there is that the local governing body is the actual approval authority for a certificate of designation, which means for a class 3 compost facility, your final point of approval for your facility is actually at the local government level, not with the state. The local government cannot approve it without our approval authority, but they can deny it even though we have approved it. So there's a whole extra layer of the process there. So all these other classes of facilities, you're just going to submit documentation to me or somebody else in our permitting group for review and approval. You'll have your zoning component set aside from that. That'll be something else that you'll need to work with through kind of like a parallel process. With the class 3, you're going to submit all this documentation to the local governing body, who will then refer it to the state for technical review. We'll do our review, we'll work back and forth with you to get this document approved. Then we will submit a recommendation of approval to that local governing body. This is where their public hearing comes into play, where you're going to have to essentially make your case to the local governing body, usually county commissioners, about how to approve your facility. This also means there's an extra step of approval that may add in conditions for your facility. The state will probably have some standard conditions for approval of your site that we have with most facilities. The local government can add whatever conditions they want of approval of your facility. So have a good feeling for those before you get into that process, because sometimes they can be huge strains on your operations. Have another slide, Jennifer? Yes. Here's our exemptions. So things that are exempt from the solid waste regulations: agricultural waste, which I mentioned, that's everything from the growing of crops to the raising of animals. Any waste stream generated from that is an agricultural waste. This does not include processing waste. So think about harvest waste, not process waste. Backyard composting is exempt. This includes community garden level composting. And then biosolids composting that happens at the point of generation. So at a wastewater treatment facility where they're only composting biosolids, that's also exempt because it's regulated under our water quality control division. And the next one, is there more? I don't even remember what I put in here. Oh, look at this. Oh, we do have two conditional exemptions as well. They're not heavily used, but they do offer a little bit of flexibility. We've got the CESQ one in there. We already talked about that. So it's kind of like by following the rules within the requirements of the regs, you're exempt from being regulated as a larger scale compost facility. That's what conditionally exempt small quantity facility means. And then agricultural, we have this weird nuanced agricultural conditional exemption, which allows you to import wood waste to go along with your ag compost operation, as long as the agricultural waste only comes from on site. So essentially, if you have like a large, confined animal feeding operation, and you have a lot of manure that you're managing and you need a carbon source to go along with that, you can import the carbon source as necessary to make that compost go. But you cannot become a repository for all of the other agricultural waste around your area and then import. That's when you become a class 2 facility. I think that's it for me. Do we have
That's
questions?
that.
I'll take this, Jennifer. I think that's the end. Jace, thank you all for your presentation. Go ahead.
Then I was just gonna talk about this slide and then we can kick it over to you, and if we have
Great.
time, allow some questions.
I was, just going to start with the questions in the chat and then jump in. But yes, please finish this slide. My apologies.
No, that's okay. So I just wanted, what I really wanted to say as an end note is because I know we have a lot of people here who this might be your first time going to a Recycle Colorado meeting, and I want to just talk about some of the things that you could do to keep learning and stay connected around composting and organics diversion. If you're not a member of Recycle Colorado, I strongly encourage you to join Recycle Colorado. We have we have a number of councils that you can join where you can learn and participate on any number of things, right? There's the Greater Colorado Council, which is where you guys are at today, where we're talking about uniquely like issues that uniquely impact rural and mountain communities. Maybe that's a state policy that affects us very differently than it might from Front Range communities, or it could just be simply sharing ideas, challenges, solutions that work in our communities and at our scale. The Colorado Composting Council is another area where you can get involved. And it's exactly what it sounds like, right? That group is focused entirely on compost and organics management. Again, great place to talk through operational questions, regulations, contamination challenges, market development. If you are a member of Recycle Colorado, you're going to get newsletters, which are great, but you also have access to these councils, right? And just like anything, you're going to get what you put into it. So I really highly recommend that you join a council, get involved, talk with folks, and become a part of this group that we've got going and this community. Oh, the thing I didn't talk about, if you join the composting council, there's an added bonus because they are also affiliated with the US Composting Council. So that'll give you national level resources, guidance, and industry experience. Recycle Colorado also hosts the annual Summit for Recycling and Composting each June. The summit typically includes a half day focused on policy. So if policy is your jam, you join the policy committee and you can do that for half a day, where you talk about, what types of policy is important to you, and where the state should go in terms of policy, and where Recycle Colorado should put resources into learning more and developing new legislation. Potentially. It's not always just creating legislation. Sometimes it is supporting the legislation that's already been written, right? So I don't want to go too much into that, but if that's your thing, you can do that, right? And then at the summit, we'll also have 2 days of educational sessions, right? And one track is usually focused on recycling, and the other track is usually focused on continuing education in specific to composting. And then earlier I had mentioned the Colorado Circular Communities Enterprise, or C3. Again, grant funding. They're going to support composting, recycling, waste reduction, anything that's going to support diversion and circular economy initiatives in Colorado. The STEPS program is specific for local governments, technical assistance. Maybe you just have a question. Maybe you have a small project you want to look into, or maybe you have something much larger. Like for Mesa County, I got a grant to do that compost market study that I mentioned to everyone. It's really exciting. Everyone says, "Oh, congratulations, you got a grant. That's so exciting." It was really easy. I called them and I said, "Hey, I've got this idea." And they were all for it. And I'm really looking forward to doing this very robust study and being able to share it with our community here on the Western Slope and our other composters. I hope that will really get compost sales up and up. I just wanted to say very quickly, get involved, stay engaged. There's a strong network of people in Colorado who are willing to share what they've learned. So you don't have to figure this out alone, right? Call me, call Liz, call Bill, call us, get involved. We'll share. And with that, I am done. If Ben, you want to take over and do questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Jennifer. That was a really great overview of Recycle Colorado and ways to, get involved with composting and just general waste management here in Colorado. I'm going to facilitate a few questions for our presenters. Please feel free to raise your hands if you are interested in asking a question, but I am going to start with those that were put in the chat. Um, the first question in the chat is regarding the source of manure these our presenters are receiving. Are these slaughterhouses, factory farm settings? Is it horse, chicken, pig? Are these sources keeping or utilizing a portion of the waste they produce? So, what are your feedstocks from a manure perspective, and how are they managed?
Well, I guess I can answer that for us. Of course, the answer will be different for every compost site in the state because everyone's getting different stuff. But for South Canyon, most of the manure we get is horse manure from horse riding and horse boarding facilities in our area.
Yeah, I would second that for Mesa County. Our experience has been if you have a large feedlot or something, you're using that manure on your site. So mostly for us, it is also coming from boarding situations and horses.
Great.
Yeah, I
Brian, do you
could
have any?
I could chime in and just say that it does definitely depend on where you're at. I think over here on the east side of the state, there's a lot more CAFOs, as we call them, concentrated animal feeding operations. They all have usually these nutrient management plans that they have to manage about their manure. And sometimes they'll have companies come in and manage manure holistically for them. A lot of times, these are the ones that I mentioned are trying to stay out of the solid waste regulations. So they manage all this stuff under the agricultural exemption. So they are registered composters with the Colorado Department of Agriculture, which also means that they're going to be your competitor if you're a solid waste composter. And unfortunately, their overhead is likely lower, but they don't have access to all that good carbon material to make good compost. So essentially, often what they're doing is just kind of just doing composted manure, which I don't think is as high quality of a product as what our solid waste composters are making. However, sometimes you can make inroads into some of those feed operations and get that material for yourself. It's just going to be kind of a cost benefit for you versus them. But yeah, I think most of their manure operations are that are taking them into solid waste operations are doing like Liz and Jennifer said, where it's going to be horse or small scale ag, things like that.
Thank you all for the answer to that. I appreciate the varied viewpoints in that and understanding that the places that are providing it to the landfill may not have a beneficial use source. My question around this raised because I'm seeing a lot of the CAFOs that Jace mentioned applying for RNG or renewable natural gas permits because they're only using about half the manure that they create as a amendment for the soil as a soil amendment, and they have so much waste that exists that it's contaminating ground and soil water, and so as a way to they're attempting to turn their excess waste into manure methane generation facilities. And we're seeing a lot of air quality permits that are coming from these factory farms in the south and front slope due to how to solve the issues of their manure. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Brian. Our next question is from Rachel Setsky, and it's pertinent to you, Liz. And the question is just, you mentioned that your program is covered by tip fees. Are these tip fees just for organics, or are they general landfill tip fees?
Great question, Rachel. So our composting site operations is paid for by the tipping fees that are paid for the stuff that goes into it. So just the organics. And I try really hard to look at all of our pricing and price the tipping fees in such a way that the tipping fee reflects the cost of actually managing that material. So if you look at our website, there's about 57 different tipping fees, and that can be a little confusing for people, but it's because different materials cost wildly different amounts to manage. So we have different tipping fees for food waste, for brush, for leaves, for manure, and they're all on our website. But yeah, some of them are quite high. So yeah, those do cover the cost of our composting facility.
Thanks, Liz. One other question in the chat that I see comes from Ryan Call with EcoCycle, and it's to all presenters, and it is, how do other states and communities with robust composting programs grow their finished compost sales? So feel free to take that, any of you.
This is a huge question that I think everybody's trying to work on, and there's no real good, clean answer. I think procurement requirements is a popular solution, whether they be at the local level or at the state level. I don't know of a ton of state level procurement requirements that have been put in place and that are effective, but essentially I think that's probably solution number one. And then I think probably the other big answer that we haven't really been able to figure out is the ag world, like Jennifer mentioned, and getting into that ag world. And I think it's really just it's kind of a cost basis component right there, right? Not only do you need to get the material to the sites where they're going to use it, but you also need to figure out a way to economically spread it. How many acres can you realistically spread it on? What's the cost per acre? And I think we have to sell that as your input on compost equals less input on water and fertilizer, right? So I don't think we have good math for that. It's going to be a little different everywhere throughout the country. But I think when we see things like commodity farming, I don't think it's necessarily going to make big inroads into commodity farming. But I think if you think like smaller human food ag, I think it makes a lot of sense for use in those areas. And I think whether that's, I know it's the dirty word for farmers, whether that's subsidization of compost use in the ag world, or subsidization of the equipment, or subsidization of the transportation of the compost to them. I think there's ways to make that happen, but I think it's probably going to take, state level support from a funding standpoint to make it happen.
Thanks, Jace. Liz, Jen, do you guys have anything to chime in with? Otherwise, I'll go to you, Rachel.
I'll chime in real quick with one. I think in other states, what I've seen mostly is procurement requirements. Um, just on a local level, if people are having trouble with end markets, a tip I would give people is to make it as easy as possible for people to access your lab results from your testing and keep those up to date. I actually post them front and center on our website because I will say, even though, all of us are way ahead, but for a lot of people all over the country, we're still overcoming some perception issues about compost, whatever, being dirty or being, made from poop or made out of poop or whatever. And it's important for people to see those lab results, to see what's really in there and just show that you're being transparent.
A great one.
I was going to chime in since we're talking requirements. That's my realm, the policy realm. Just for anyone who isn't familiar with procurement requirements, generally what we're talking about would be like Denver Water has a requirement for all new landscaping to use a certain amount of compost per cubic yard or per square foot. And then there's also some municipalities that are looking at requirements just for municipal use that would require like Glenwood Springs is a great example of doing this without an ordinance, but of using that material locally. And so some communities are looking at codifying that to make sure that that practice is used where that local compost or mulch are used locally. So that's kind of what we're talking about with requirements. Jace mentioned state level. We know that CDOT, the Department of Transportation, at least has in their regulations that they will use compost. So that's somewhere that we could really build up use of compost when that's feasible. And yeah. The one other policy thing I wanted to mention around ag, we know the Colorado Composting Council was supportive of a bill last year, super wonky, talking about tax code, but expanded some tax language around wholesaling and use of organics like compost. So, those are the fun kinds of conversations you get to have when you're part of Colorado Composting Council and Recycle Colorado is talking tax code that can make better stuff happen in Colorado.
Wonderful. Well, that is the end of our questions in the chat. Does anybody else have anything for our presenters? Any other questions? Please feel free to raise your hand or just jump in.
I was just going to throw out there too, because I should have mentioned it in my presentation. If you're interested at all in starting a compost facility or have questions about compost facility operations, where you might fit, please reach out to me. That's my job. So I dropped my email in the chat. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Those will also be included in the notes that are sent out after this meeting.
And since you're looking at the agenda, you want to keep us flowing to the next thing?
I'm happy to keep us going. Just wanted to give the prerequisite 90 seconds of silence before we moved on. But happy to. There are a bunch of really great resources that our presenters have put into the chat. Thank you to Liz, thank you to Jace, and a huge thank you to Jennifer as well for presenting today. And our next category or topic will be a policy update from Rachel. Rachel, do you have any policy updates for us today?
As y'all are probably aware, we have started into the Colorado legislative session earlier this month. This year, Recycle Colorado is not the lead champion of any bills. If you are not aware of our process, we meet in June to have our policy retreat. That's part of our summit that Jennifer mentioned, and we identify some topics that we really want to dig into. This year, organics actually was one of those topics, and then we have working groups that look at them more carefully to try to see if there's a bill that can come out of that. And this year, really all the research we did said we need to focus more on education and outreach and maybe paths different than an actual policy. So we do still have working groups working on policies, just not working on a piece of legislation. That does not mean that Recycle Colorado is not going to be busy at the State House. We have partners and we keep our feelers out there for other groups running bills that are of interest to recycling and organics. And one of those bills that we know of that's already been introduced is one that would create a producer responsibility system for EV batteries, propulsion batteries. That bill's been introduced. It's up for committee hearing February, I think it's 11th. Recycle Colorado has not yet taken a position on that. Our policy committee is in the process. We've got a very involved process, intentionally involved process to try to get feedback from our members to say, we like this bill, we don't like this bill, that we have a concern about this piece of this bill. So we really understand where our membership's coming from. And then policy leadership makes a recommendation to our board. Our board is the entity that finally says, yes, we're going to support this bill, we're going to oppose this bill, we're going to stay, not take a position on this bill. And so we are just starting that process now with this EV bill. And there's a couple others out there. One that is around plastic pellets. I don't know if our policy committee has started looking at that one, but that's one that we may want to look at as a group. And then some others that we've heard rumblings about, but not enough to spend our time right now. I will say, I should have started with this. This council started as a combination of the Western Slope Council and the Rural Policy Committee. And so the voices on this council are incredibly important to make sure that bills that we see as Recycle Colorado, that we see that we're weighing in on, they, sometimes they have a tendency to be front range centric language. At least when we write them, that's not our intent. And so we want to make sure that folks outside of the front range weigh in and can say, hey, that language isn't going to work for us, or we need something different. So again, your voices here are really important. I think that's it, unless anyone has questions.
All right. Well, that'll move us into our final section, or one of our final updates here, which is regarding EPR. I'm actually going to pass this back to you, Rachel, unless there's someone else on the call who would like to take lead.
I know there are a gazillion people on this call, which is awesome. I will say what EPR is, and if someone who's more involved wants to come and chime in, I will definitely let you do that. EPR is extended producer responsibility, or producer responsibility as we call it in Colorado. When we are referring to those updates, we are currently talking about the packaging producer responsibility. I see Brian's on here. He's on the advisory board. The biggest update is that the plan was approved by CDPHE in December, and the Circular Action Alliance is moving forward. Hopefully, if you represent a community, you have already registered with CAA to get those reimbursements and you're part of that process. But I will turn it over to Brian to give a quick update on what's going on.
Yeah, so hi everybody, Brian Loma. I'm here, I guess, representing my seat with Green Latinos, my work with Green Latinos. As far as EPR goes, we do have an expectation of June when the recycling pickups will be available for those communities that want it at no cost service for households. And so there is a timeline that leads through 2030 for all small businesses and households as well. One of the big things about Colorado's EPR is that the CDPHE determined, with help from the Attorney General's office, that certain accounting methodologies were going to be accepted and others were not. And that may play with some legal applications down the road, but as of right now, it's nothing that's going to hinder the program from rolling out and starting that recycling process. Also, in the legislative process under producer responsibilities, there is the battery stewardship bill that's looking at being modified this year with propulsion batteries. So something for those of you who do policy work and with legislative to be keeping your eyes on. And by the way, the LPMA is the automotive fluids that has also been approved and should be moving forward this year. And hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be seeing Recycle On Colorado advertising and education statewide, multilingually, to be teaching communities about how recycling really works and that they should be trusting it here in our state.
Thank you, Brian. Really helpful and really appreciate your update. Caroline, we're going to go to you.
Hi, friends. Sorry, moving the window over to the screen where I'm looking at you instead of
Amen.
looking off to the side. Yeah, so my name is Caroline Mitchell, and I work with the consulting company HDR now, but I was a prior member of the EPR advisory board with Brian, and have continued to track EPR. So speaking in my Caroline hat, but just a couple of additional updates to add on to Brian's excellent updates. So the producers have started paying dues to Circular Action Alliance, which is great, important first step. And as Brian had mentioned, the reimbursements for the service providers can start as soon for services provided in June. So the way the system works, the producers pay Circular Action Alliance. Circular Action Alliance then funds the actual service providers, whether it's nonprofits or municipal governments or private haulers that are collecting and processing and conducting the education. So the primary process, if you are one of those entities that provides one of those services or might be interested in it and haven't already connected with Circular Action Alliance, filling out the request for reimbursement on their website is the most important first step. And they started out with local governments. They have since closed the window for those applications for local governments. They will reopen it after they process this first round of applications. But it is definitely, it is the time that we are moving from the planning to the implementation stage for EPR in Colorado, which is incredibly exciting. And so that direct relationship with Circular Action Alliance will be an important way for all the different entities to participate. Again, it's called the request for reimbursement, and those education activities are happening starting statewide and locally starting in the middle of this year as well. So just a little bit of additional information and that super exciting front.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Really appreciate it. Steve, what you got for us?
Yeah, I can add a couple more things on EPR. Currently, we have not seen the open market rates from CAA. Crow has not yet completed their review, which is a consulting firm. Every indication is that's not going to hit until the second quarter of this year. If that's the case, that could potentially delay the start of the program. So something to keep in mind. The open market rate, because Colorado has so many open markets, that is going to be a significant negative impact to pretty much the EPR program. So that's one thing. The other thing is we're keeping a very close eye on the lawsuit that is currently happening in Oregon regarding EPR. The challenge so the National Association of Wholesale Distributors actually filed a lawsuit in Oregon after that law went into effect. In Colorado, they've indicated that they're going to sue probably fairly soon and ask for an injunction to stop the program here. So a couple things to watch and to keep track of. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Steve. Yep, certainly worth keeping an eye on everything that's happening regarding EPR. It's a very exciting time, but also a time to continue to leverage our voice as we support EPR and the rollout of the extended producer responsibility for packaging. I am going to send it back to Rachel to talk a bit about Lobby Day before we conclude the meeting with some member updates if anybody has any. But I will remain on the EPR note for just one more minute to see if anybody has any further questions or updates for those on this call. All right, we're in great shape. I'm going to pass it back to you, Rachel. Would you give us a brief update on Lobby Day and any request for help?
Sure. Sorry, Ben. I was too slow in your
No
quick,
worries. I was too quick.
no, in your, I was, anyhow, I just had one last little piece to add in, and that was, that, and I absolutely hear the elements that Steve is talking about. And, I think all along Circular Action Alliance has, not all along, but an important element that Circular Action Alliance has been trying to communicate is that various elements of the program are going to roll out at different stages, that it's sort of like turning a dial as opposed to flipping a switch. So those municipal programs are likely the ones that would be starting doing the reimbursement in the middle of the year, and those additional, so those open market communities, absolutely a whole different animal. And so, there will be a lot of different um, elements of the service that will be rolling out in various timelines in the coming future.
Thanks, Caroline. Hey, I might be breaking protocol here, but I am curious on that.
Always.
Are they going to do the whole state municipal at the same time, do you guys think? Like, will Front Range and Western Slope, will those both start reimbursements flowing in June, or are they going to phase it
That's a
out
great
throughout the
question,
year?
Jeff. So it is a dial rather than a switch, as CAA says a lot. So it's obviously going to be easier to start in communities that have some type of organized hauling. So if you're looking at a Durango that self hauls and has that already coordinated, it's going to be a lot easier to roll out than in a community that's an open market, or even a community that has a contract like Golden or Fort Collins that contract with a hauler. It's going to be a lot easier to roll it out there. And then if you're looking at communities that have open market, but they do have recycling service, that's going to be the next easiest. And then the hardest to get to, of course, is going to be communities that don't have that infrastructure. They don't have companies that have trucks that are offering recycling. And so it is going to be phased in and worked in as much as they can. But I can say just EcoCycle, if you're not familiar with us, we part of what we do is we support local communities with policies and with programming. And we have seen just a crazy uptick in communities that are interested in rolling out more recycling services and hauler licensing and stuff, trying to get ready for this. And so it's really exciting to see the progress being made in the state on producer responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you. So it sounds like if there are municipal contracts with private haulers, like they're going to try to execute all those around June. They wouldn't say like, "Hey, we'll do the ones on the Front Range and then the Western Slope," or vice versa, or whatever it is. They'll try to hit all those contracts around June, is what I'm
Any
hearing.
of us on the call answering that would be speculating.
Okay.
But those kinds of questions, I know I was talking to someone from CAA yesterday and was told there's going to be a lot more information released on February 13th. And so we should all watch for that and then keep sending them our questions, because just like us, they are building this as they fly it, as the saying goes. And the folks at CAA, they come from our communities and they want to make this right.
Jeff, it seems to be that the indication is that if you applied for the January 19th reimbursement, that those will all come in June at the same time.
Great. Great. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Yep.
So I'm seeing the time and I'm going to pop us back. I forgot to mention Lobby Day. So sorry, Allie and Randy, and those of you on the call who've been planning it. If any of you want to step in, I will speak slowly and let you come on camera. Lobby Day is a really fun event that Recycle Colorado does every year. We go down to the Capitol, we engage with our legislators, we break into teams. And so each team has someone who really understands policy. They've done it before, so no one is thrown to the wolves. It's super easy, super fun way to engage with legislators. We love to have people come who are actual constituents, and we know it's hard in this time of year to get to the Capitol. Sometimes, hopefully, fingers crossed, we have a whole lot more big snowstorms, but coming March 12th, we're going to be doing Lobby Day at the Capitol again. Oh, Allie, take it away.
Oh, okay. Well, you were doing great. Yeah, we changed our date from February 12th to March 12th. Reservations are just kind of going like crazy at the Capitol, so March is going to work the best. And we kind of changed around the agenda as well a little bit more. I'm just working on updating all that. The people who have already registered, I just sent an email this morning. So if you can no longer make it or still can, just let me know in that email. And then registration is still the same with the things that are on the website. I just need to change the dates. So it'll be really fun. There isn't going to be a legislative breakfast this year. We're just going to lobby, lobby, lobby all day and then meet up at the Forte Wine Bar, which is in the Lincoln Center building's lobby. And we've gone there the last couple of years. And we'll have some fun with legislators and our advocates afterwards and just celebrate the day.
I just want to add to that. People hear lobby and there's all sorts of negative connotations. Really, what this is saying, hey, Representative so and so, I am really excited about recycling because recycling is awesome. And let me talk to you about it and how it's great for our state. And you get to just have super fun conversations with people who, many of whom are like, oh, composting, tell me more. So it's a great way to just make those connections with our representatives so that they know what they're talking about when they hear policies around zero waste.
Yeah, and I posted the video that Evan Cruz with Diverse made last year from our lobby day. So you can kind of see what it's like. But yeah, like Rachel said, it's super fun, even for people who are like anxious about public speaking or whatnot. Like you're the expert in this field and legislators aren't. So it really shows that and gives you a little boost of confidence when you're there talking.
Great. Anybody have any other comments on lobby day? Questions for Allie or Rachel? I'm going to take my time this time. Great. So with the last 10 minutes here of the Greater Colorado Council meeting, we have just left some opportunity for further questions and just general member updates. If there's anything you'd like to share, opportunities that you have taken advantage of, grants, other things, we'd love to hear from you during this last 10 minutes. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, all. I'm Sarah Hernick. I'm the Rural Outreach and Technical Assistance Specialist with the Colorado Circular Communities Program. So I work in that strategic technical expertise for the public sector, the technical assistance program that Jennifer was talking about in regard to her composting facility. But I just wanted to share a quick update on our program. So we had put some of our grants on pause as we just reevaluated our processes so that we could be more efficient to ensure that we're providing the best possible service to all of you and everyone else around the state who are engaged in like circular economy projects. And so I just wanted to share that all of our grant opportunities are open. And our technical assistance opportunities are still open. They always have been, but just I can put the link in the chat again, but if you are interested in funding opportunities or technical assistance opportunities to develop and implement projects that relate to the circular economy, so composting, recycling, anything that keeps materials out of landfills, will entertain the idea. So just go to our website and feel free to look around. If you have any general questions, there are inquiry forms in our funding section of our website, as well as our technical assistance section. So you can fill out that inquiry form, or you can also send us an email and I can put that in the chat, but I'll do that in a second. I can't multitask. So yeah, I just want to share an update. Everything's open. We're open for business. We're always happy to answer questions. So if you aren't sure if your project is eligible, we're more than happy to have that conversation with you and talk about eligibility. So yeah. Thank you. If anyone
Thanks,
has
Sarah.
questions, I'm happy to answer them too.
If you would drop that link in the chat, I can include those in our notes for the rest of the council. Thank you very, very much. More awkward Zoom pause.
Ben, is there anything exciting happening in Steamboat?
There is something exciting happening in Steamboat. I will let Caitlin or Alicia chime in, but the city of Steamboat Springs and the Western Resilience Center recently received a grant to offer zero waste opportunities at our Winter Carnival, which is more of a 5-day event here in Steamboat Springs, celebrating the winter culture and winter sports club and all the rest. And Alicia and Caitlin have done a wonderful job focusing on making sure that we manage waste appropriately from these city-led events. So, Caitlin, Alicia, feel free to chime in if you have anything you want to share. But huge kudos to you guys, and really awesome that we're getting this started.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, Caitlin, I'm gonna let Caitlin take that.
Yeah, so we applied for a grant. I was actually going to share this opportunity. It is through Canned Aid, their Crush It Crusade branch, which is funded by the Ball Foundation. They're actually based out of Colorado, but do grant funding nationally for events. So I can get that link also and share that out. But yeah, so it's primarily a partnership with Winter Sports Club, which is, for those in mountain communities familiar, I'm sure you all have one attached to your ski towns where our youth athletes participate in all the different winter disciplines. And they have over 700 athletes involved. And basically, this big event, like Ben shared, is it's in its 113th year, and it's kind of a celebration of all the different winter aspects. And there's food and drinks and fireworks shows. And so we're kind of, for the first time, saw this as an opportunity to tackle some of their diversion goals that they just really haven't had the capacity to look into. So I will be there it's all next week, and working with a team of excited volunteers and some youth athletes as well will be there also helping out. So there's a fun element with that. And yeah, that grant program is helping us cover composting and recycling through that. So really exciting coming up next week.
Awesome work, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Well, it sure seems like there are still member updates, but I think that we are getting to the end of our call. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to share?
Ben, I just want to, sorry, we should have organized this, and sorry if I'm stepping on toes. Liz, do you want to just mention the next COCC meeting, since we are partnering on this event and you are leadership for that group?
Absolutely, yes. So in case anyone here didn't know, I'm the co-chair of the Colorado Composting Council. We also have a quarterly meeting. Our next meeting is February 17th. Let me just pull it up here. It is... And you can, if you want to join the meeting, so our next meeting is February 17th from 2 to 4. If you want to join the meeting or you want to join Colorado Composting Council, just go to that page that I put in the chat, and there is a contact us button. So you can just click that, or you can just email Allie, or you can email me, and just get in touch with us somehow and join our meeting. It's all things compost. If you're interested in compost, if you're interested in starting a compost facility, come join us. So yeah, it'll be a good time. And I think we'll have our guests. We always try to have a guest speaker. Our guest speaker at that meeting will be talking about some changes that have happened recently in the Front Range, with some smaller composters sort of joining forces and creating a larger composting force. So it should be interesting.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I'm going to conclude the meeting. There are a bunch of really great resources in the chat, so feel free to grab those before you take off. Those will additionally be included in some notes that should be released closer to the end of the week to the rest of this council. For those of you that do not receive the Greater Colorado Council notes because you are not necessarily members of this council, please do reach out to myself, Rachel Setsky, or Emma Marino, and we will be happy to provide those to you. Otherwise, happy Tuesday or Wednesday.
Can I just chime in real quick? So we've changed our format to a quarterly meeting. If you're used to coming every month, we'd love to see you. We'll hang out some other time. But our next quarterly meeting, we are looking at potentially a conversation with the Construction and Deconstruction Council and COCC, looking at some of the building codes that are coming into play, particularly the wildfire building codes, and how we can divert materials with that. So if that's something you have expertise on, please reach out to us. We would love to have some good speakers, or we will just see you and you can learn from whoever we do find to speak.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to call it there. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your 3 minutes back, and we will see you all in a couple months. Thanks, guys.